The escape pod crashed through the thick atmosphere of Iridia with a screaming howl. Inside, Captain Do-hyun Park gripped the safety straps as the small vessel shuddered and sparked. Warning lights flashed red across the control panel. The pod was never meant for planetary entry, but Do-hyun had no choice after the attack. "Computer status report," he said, his voice steady despite the violent descent. "Hull integrity at 27%. Impact in 45 seconds. Survival chance minimal." Do-hyun closed his eyes. Images of his research ship, the Horizon, exploding in space filled his mind. The faces of his crew, his friends, appeared one by one. All gone now, caught in the surprise attack from the Tyke warship. The pod slammed into the surface of Iridia. Metal twisted and bent. The crash knocked Do-hyun unconscious. Hours later, he woke to the strange purple twilight of Iridia's eternal dusk. Blood trickled down his forehead, and pain shot through his left leg when he tried to move. The pod door had been torn off in the crash. Cold air rushed in, carrying unfamiliar scents, something like wet moss and metal. "Gotta move," Do-hyun muttered to himself. "Not safe here." He pulled himself from the wreckage, dragging his injured leg. His survival pack had remained intact, giving him basic supplies: a water filter, emergency rations for 3 days, a medical kit, and a small tool set. Most importantly, he still had his datapad, though its communication systems were dead. Do-hyun looked up at the sky. 2 moons hung low, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. Tall, thin trees with blue-black bark surrounded the crash site. In the distance, mountains rose like jagged teeth against the horizon. This was not where they were supposed to land. The research mission was meant to study the oceans on the other side of the planet, far from this strange forest. Do-hyun had been the lead scientist on a peaceful mission to study Iridia's unique ecosystem. Now he was the only one left. He treated his leg wound as best he could and fashioned a walking stick from a broken piece of the pod. Then he erased the pod's data core. If the Tyke found it, they would learn too much about Earth's defense systems. "Need to find shelter," he said to himself. "Water. Then figure out how to signal for rescue." Moving slowly through the forest, Do-hyun remained alert. Every sound, the rustling of strange leaves, the distant cries of unknown creatures, made him pause and listen. This world was not meant for humans. The gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's, making each step an effort. The air was breathable but thin, leaving him constantly short of breath. Night fell quickly on Iridia. The temperature dropped and new sounds emerged from the darkness. Do-hyun found a small cave formed by fallen rocks and crawled inside. He didn't dare light a fire. The Tyke might be looking for survivors. Sleep came in short, troubled bursts. Do-hyun dreamed of the attack, the sudden appearance of the Tyke warship, the first devastating blast that crippled the horizon, the desperate scramble to the escape pods. He had tried to save others, but in the chaos, he ended up alone. Morning, if the slightly brighter twilight could be called that, brought new challenges. Do-hyun's leg had stiffened overnight. His water supply was limited. He needed to find a source soon. Using his scientist's training, Do-hyun studied the plant life around him. Some of the trees had water collection points where their branches met, their trunks. He carefully sampled the liquid, testing it with his portable analyzer before drinking. It tasted strange, slightly sweet with a mineral aftertaste, but it was safe. Day 1 of survival on Iridia. Do-hyun recorded in his data pad. Species observed so far: 7 types of plant life, 2 small insect-like creatures. No sign of large predators yet. He spoke the words aloud, finding comfort in the familiar routine of scientific observation. It helped push away the fear and loneliness. By midday, Do-hyun discovered tracks in the soft soil, 3-toed prints unlike any earth animal. Something large moved through these woods. He would need to be careful. Following a small stream, Do-hyun walked for hours. His leg pain lessened somewhat, but hunger began to gnaw at his stomach. The emergency rations would not last long. He would need to find food on this alien world, a dangerous prospect. Near sunset, Do-Yun froze. Through a break in the trees, he spotted a structure, angular and artificial against the organic shapes of the forest. Hope and caution warred within him as he slowly approached. It was an outpost, half buried in the hillside and covered with the same blue-black vegetation as the surrounding trees. The architecture was strange. Curved doorways too tall and narrow for a human, walls made of a smooth material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Taik design, Do-Hyun whispered, recognizing elements from briefings back on Earth. But older, abandoned maybe. He circled the structure carefully before approaching the entrance. The door was partially open, stuck in place by years of disuse. Do-Hyun squeezed through the gap into darkness. Using the small light from his data pad, he explored the outpost. Dust covered everything. Strange symbols marked the walls, some Taik writing but other markings he didn't recognize. The place seemed to have been abandoned for decades, maybe longer. In what appeared to be a research lab, Do-Hyun found equipment. Some still had power, lighting up with soft blue glows when he touched them. One device projected a holographic map of the region. Another seemed to be a communication terminal, though it was dead. This wasn't just a Taik outpost, Do-Hyun realized, studying the design elements more carefully. Some of this technology is different. They were working with someone else. He gathered what useful items he could find, tools, containers, what might have been preserved food packets. In one room he discovered what looked like sleeping quarters, with a flat surface that might serve as a bed. As night fell again, Do-Hyun secured the entrance as best he could and settled in. For the first time since the crash, he felt a small measure of safety. That feeling vanished when his data pad picked up an energy signature entering Iridia's atmosphere. The pattern matched Taik ships. Do-Hyun's heart raced. They had come looking for survivors. Outside, far in the distance, he saw it, a streak of light cutting through the dim sky. A ship, much smaller than the warship that had attacked the horizon, but deadly all the same. They sent a hunter, Do-Hyun whispered. He quickly gathered his supplies. The outpost was too obvious a place to hide. He needed to return to the forest, to use the terrain and his knowledge to survive. As he slipped back into the woods, Do-Hyun caught a glimpse of the Taik ship landing several miles away. In the strange twilight of Iridia, a new game had begun. One where he was the prey. I am not a monster, Do-Hyun said to himself as he disappeared into the shadows. But I will survive. Commander So-Hee stepped out of her scout ship onto the surface of Iridia. The planet's heavy gravity felt natural to her Taik physiology. Her tall, slender body was covered in lightweight battle armor that shimmered with a faint blue glow. She breathed deeply, her dual respiratory systems easily processing the thin air that would leave a human gasping. Scanning for human life signs, she said into her comm unit. Her voice was musical yet cold, each word precisely formed. The device on her wrist blinked with information. One human life form detected, approximately 7 kilometers northeast. The escape pod had been located 3 kilometers to the west. Target confirmed, So-Hee reported. Beginning pursuit. We'll update when the human is eliminated. Remember your orders, Commander, came the reply from General Taejun aboard the main vessel in orbit. We need to know what information the human gathered before elimination. Understood. So-Hee ended the transmission. She checked her weapons. A pulse rifle strapped to her back, a stunner at her hip, and 3 small discs that could expand into shield generators. Taik military technology was far superior to human defenses. This hunt would be quick. So-Hee had never failed a mission. As the youngest commander in the Taik Special Forces, she had earned her rank through perfect execution of difficult assignments. Hunting down a single injured human on an uninhabited world would be simple, or so she thought. She moved through the forest with practiced silence. Taik eyes were adapted to low light conditions, giving her perfect vision in Iridia's perpetual twilight. Her steps were light despite the heavy gravity, her movements fluid and precise. So-Hee reached the crash site first. The human escape pod lay broken and empty. She examined it carefully, noting the removed data core and the blood on the safety straps. The human was injured, but smart enough to destroy sensitive information. She knelt and touched the ground, feeling for vibrations and temperature differences that might reveal the human's path. Training and enhanced senses allowed her to pick up the trail easily. Heading northeast, she murmured. Limping, likely injured left leg based on stride pattern. So he had studied humans extensively during her training. Their physical weaknesses were numerous. Fragile bones, limited senses, poor adaptation to environmental changes. But they were known to be clever and unpredictable. The training videos showed how humans had sometimes overcome superior forces through what Tayek military called irrational creativity. Her people had been at war with humans for 15 years, though Sohi had never met one face-to-face. The conflict had begun after failed negotiations over territory in the Centauri system. Since then, propaganda had portrayed humans as dangerous, barbarians, selfish creatures who destroyed planets they colonized and threatened galactic stability. Know your enemy, Sohi reminded herself, recalling her training. The human monster appears weak but hides great danger. She followed the trail for hours, moving steadily through the strange forest. The human had stopped several times, presumably to rest the injured leg. At one stream, Sohi found evidence that the human had collected water. Surviving, not just running, she noted with grudging respect. As twilight deepened into night, Sohi's tracking led her to the abandoned research outpost. She approached cautiously, her rifle ready. The structure was old, built during the brief period of cooperation between Take and humans before the war. She had read about these joint research facilities but had never seen one. The door was recently disturbed, dust patterns broken. The human had been here, perhaps was still inside. Sohi entered silently, using thermal vision to scan for heat signatures. Nothing current, but residual warmth suggested the human had left less than an hour ago. Inside, she saw that equipment had been moved, containers opened. The human had gathered supplies. On one table lay an empty food packet, the seal recently broken. Clever, Sohi said aloud, found the emergency provisions. She examined the research equipment, much of it still functional despite decades of abandonment. This facility had been important once, studying Iridia's unique properties. Her mission briefing had not explained why this particular human survivor was so important, or why General Taejun seemed so interested in this planet. So he accessed a still-functional terminal, scanning through old research logs. Most data was corrupted, but fragments remained. References to cellular regeneration properties and indigenous microbial life with adaptive capabilities suggested medical research. A noise outside snapped her to attention. So he moved quickly to the entrance, weapon ready. Just a local creature, something like a six-legged lizard scurrying past. Her wrist device blinked again. The human life sign was moving, now 5 kilometers to the east. So he set out immediately, leaving the outpost behind. The forest grew thicker as she traveled. Strange luminescent plants began to appear, casting an eerie blue glow across the landscape. These plants were not in her briefing files. Iridia was still largely unexplored, its full ecosystem unknown even to Tayek scientists. So he moved quickly but carefully. The human's trail was becoming harder to follow. No longer a straight line of escape, but a winding path that doubled back on itself in places. The human is setting false trails, she realized. So he adjusted her tracker to filter out older signs, focusing only on the most recent human activity. The path clarified somewhat, though still irregular. After another hour of tracking, she paused. Something was wrong. The trail had become too obvious, like the human wanted to be followed. She scanned the area carefully and noticed disturbed soil near a large tree. A trap. Simple but potentially effective. A pit covered with vegetation. So he stepped around it easily. Underestimating me, she said with a slight smile. But learning. The human's tactics were changing, becoming more defensive. So he increased her caution as she continued the pursuit. Near a ridge overlooking a Vast ravine, the trail ended abruptly, so he studied the ground, the trees, the rocks. Nothing. Then she saw it. A single boot print on a rock near the ravine edge, as if the human had jumped. She approached the edge and looked down. The ravine was deep, with a river running far below. No sign of the human. Could not have survived that jump, she said, but doubt crept into her voice. A sound behind her, a stone shifting. So he turned quickly, rifle raised. Standing 20 meters away was the human. Male, medium height, dark, hair cut short. His left leg was bandaged. He wore the torn uniform of an earth science vessel, not military. In his hand was not a weapon, but a small device so he didn't recognize. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Hunter and hunted, alien and human, seeing each other clearly for the first time. "I am unarmed," the human said in heavily accented Tek language. "My name is Do-hyun Park. I was chief scientist on a research vessel, so he kept her weapon trained on him. You speak our language." "I studied your people before the war," Do-hyun replied. "I believed in peace between our species. There can be no peace with monsters," so he said, repeating the words from her training. Do-hyun's expression showed no fear, only sadness. "Is that what they told you we are?" Before So he could answer, the ground shook violently. An earthquake, common on Iridia, with its unstable tectonic activity. The edge of the ravine where So-hee stood began to crumble. She lost her footing as the earth gave way beneath her. The rifle flew from her hands as she fell, grabbing desperately at roots and rocks. Her fingers caught a tree root, stopping her fall, but she dangled now over the deep ravine. The human could simply walk away. Let her fall. Complete this hunt in reverse. Instead, Do-hyun limped quickly to the edge. He lay flat on his stomach and reached down, extending his hand to her. "Take my hand," he called, "quickly." So he hesitated, confusion clouding her training. Why would the human help her? The root began to tear free from the soil. She had seconds before falling to certain death. So he reached up and grabbed Do-hyun's outstretched hand. So-hee's hand gripped Do-hyun's tightly as he pulled her up from the crumbling edge. Her body was lighter than a human's despite her height, but the effort still made Do-hyun's injured leg throb with pain. When she was safely on solid ground, they both collapsed, breathing heavily. For a long moment, neither spoke. The earthquake had stopped, but small rocks still tumbled down into the ravine. Do-hyun's pulse raced, partly from exertion and partly from fear. The Taik hunter lay just 2 meters away. Her weapons were gone, fallen into the ravine, but she was still dangerous. So he sat up first, her large eyes studying Do-hyun with open confusion. "Why did you save me?" she asked finally. "I was sent to kill you." Do-hyun shrugged. Seemed like the right thing to do. "The right thing?" So he repeated the words as if they made no sense. "But we are enemies." "Are we?" Do-hyun asked. "I'm a scientist, not a soldier. My mission was peaceful research." "All humans say such things," So he replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Do-hyun slowly stood up, careful not to make any sudden movements. His left leg could barely support his weight now. "I need to find shelter before night falls completely," he said. "You can come with me or not. Your choice." Without waiting for her answer, he began limping away from the ravine. After a moment of hesitation, So-hee followed. She could have killed him easily even without weapons, but something held her back. They found shelter in a small cave about a kilometer from the ravine. Do-hyun gathered some of the glowing plants to provide light. The blue glow made the cave feel strangely peaceful. "Your leg needs treatment," So-hee said, watching Do-hyun wince as he sat down. "I used the last of my medical supplies this morning," he replied. So-hee reached into a pocket on her armor and pulled out a small silver tube. "This will help with the pain and speed healing," she said, offering it to him. Do-hyun hesitated. "Why help me now?" "A life for a life," So-hee said simply. "I owe you a debt." Do-hyun accepted the medicine. It was cool on his skin and immediately reduced the throbbing pain. As the discomfort faded, his mind became clearer. "I think we need to talk," he said. "Really talk. About why your people attacked my research ship. About why you were sent to hunt me specifically." Sohi sat across from him, her back straight, her expression guarded. "My orders were to find any survivors, extract information about what you discovered on Iridia, and then eliminate you." "But why?" Do-Yun pressed. "What's so important about this planet?" "I was not told," Sohi admitted. "Only that your research vessel was not just collecting scientific data, that you were looking for something dangerous." Do-Hyun shook his head. "We were studying the biological properties of Iridia's ecosystem. Some of the microbial life here has unique adaptive qualities. We thought it might help us understand the plague affecting both our species." Sohi's eyes widened slightly. "You know about the plague on Tyche worlds?" "Of course we do. It's affecting human colonies too." Do-Hyun leaned forward. "Did your superiors tell you that? That the same disease is killing both our peoples?" Sohi was silent for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "They told us the plague was a human weapon that accidentally infected some of your own colonies." "That's not true," Do-Hyun said firmly. "The plague appeared simultaneously on worlds, in both our territories. That's why my research team was here. We were looking for a cure, not a weapon." The night grew colder. Do-Hyun used some dead plant matter to make a small fire near the cave entrance. The warmth spread slowly through the small space. "If what you say is true," so he said carefully, "then why would my commanders lie?" "War is profitable for some," Do-Hyun suggested. "Peace is not." They talked through the night, sharing information that had been hidden from both of them. Do-Hyun explained how Earth's scientific community had been working on understanding the plague for years, how they had traced its possible origin to Iridia's unique ecosystem. So he revealed that the Tyche military leadership had taken direct control of all plague research, classifying most information. Ordinary citizens knew only that the disease existed and that humans were somehow responsible. When morning came, they emerged from the cave as uneasy allies. Without discussing it, they both headed toward the abandoned research outpost. It was the only lead they had. "We should look for research records," Do-Hyun suggested as they approached the facility. The original joint mission might have found something important. Inside the outpost, they began a more thorough search than either had conducted before. So he accessed terminals that responded to Tyche biology, opening files that Do-Hyun couldn't reach. Do-Hyun's scientific knowledge helped make sense of the fragmented data. By midday, they had discovered that the original joint research team had indeed found something significant. Evidence of an ancient civilization that had once inhabited Iridia. "Look at this," Do-Hyun said, pointing to a map displayed on one of the terminals. "These aren't natural formations, they're ruins." The map showed a massive complex buried beneath the mountains 40 kilometers to the north. The joint Tyche human expedition had only begun to explore it when the war broke out, and the outpost was abandoned. The last entry mentioned something called the Keystone, so he noted, reading from another screen. They believed it was a device that could control Iridia's microbial ecosystem. Control it how? Do-Hyun wondered. "It doesn't say," so he replied. "But look at the date of this entry. 3 days before the first diplomatic breakdown between our species. 3 days before the first reports of the plague." They looked at each other, the implications clear. Whatever the research team had found might be connected to the origins of the plague itself. Their research was interrupted by a warning beep from Sohi's wrist device. She checked it quickly, her expression turning grim. "A Tyche ship is entering the atmosphere," she said. "A larger one this time. They must have realized I failed to report in." "We need to leave," Do-Hyun said, quickly gathering what useful information he could onto his data pad. "Can you contact them? Tell them you're still hunting me?" So he shook her head. "They would detect your life sign near mine. They would know I have not completed my mission." She hesitated, then added, "And I am not sure I want to complete it anymore." They left the outpost and headed north, toward the mountains and the ruins. The journey would be difficult, especially with Do-hyun's injured leg, but they had no choice. Whatever answers they sought would be found there, not here. That night they made camp in a dense part of the forest. The glowing plants were more numerous here, creating patches of blue light throughout the darkness. They had walked all day, speaking little, each lost in their own thoughts. As they sat by another small fire, So-hee finally spoke. My entire life, I was taught that humans were monsters, dangerous creatures that threatened our way of life. She looked directly at Do-hyun. But you saved my life when you could have let me die, when it would have been easier to let me die. Not all humans are good, Do-hyun said quietly, just as not all Taik are bad. We're just people, trying to survive. People, So-hee repeated. Not monsters. Not monsters, Do-hyun agreed. In the distance, thunder rumbled. The weather on Iridia was changing, a storm approaching. But for the moment, in their small camp, there was a fragile peace between two enemies, who were beginning to see each other as people. Do-hyun took out his datapad and began to write. When So-hee asked what he was doing, he explained that he was keeping a record of everything they discovered. If they didn't survive, perhaps someone would find it. Tomorrow we reach the mountains, So-hee said, looking north. And whatever is, waiting for us there. Whatever it is, Do-hyun replied, we'll face it together. The storm broke over them as night deepened, rain falling in sheets. They huddled in the shelter of a large tree, two creatures from different worlds united by a common quest for truth. The storm lasted through the night. By morning, the forest floor was soft and muddy, making their journey toward the mountains even more difficult. Do-hyun's leg felt better thanks to So-hee's medicine, but walking was still painful. They had traveled for about an hour when So-hee suddenly raised her hand, signaling Do-hyun to stop. Her head tilted slightly, her enhanced hearing picking up sounds that human ears could not detect. Aerial transport, she whispered. Two of them, coming this way. Do-hyun looked up, but saw nothing through the thick canopy of blue-black leaves. Can we hide? So-hee shook her head. They will have heat sensors. We need to separate. You are the one they want. And leave you to face them alone? No, Do-hyun said firmly. I am Taek. They will not harm me, So-hee said. I can tell them I am still hunting you. Buy you time to reach the mountains. Do-hyun hesitated. He had begun to trust So-hee, but this plan required complete faith in someone who had been sent to kill him just days ago. I will find you, So-hee promised, seeing his doubt. By the ruins. You have the map on your datapad. Before Do-hyun could argue further, the sound of engines grew louder. So-hee pushed him toward a dense thicket of plants. Go now, she urged. Trust me. With a last look at his unlikely ally, Do-hyun turned and ran as best he could with his injured leg. Behind him, he heard the Taik ships breaking through the canopy, the whine of their engines growing louder as they landed. Do-hyun did not slow down until he was sure he was beyond the range of their sensors. He found a small stream and waded through it, hoping the water would mask his trail. The mountains loomed closer now, their jagged peaks reaching into the perpetually twilight sky of Iridia. As he traveled, Do-hyun reviewed the map on his datapad. The ruins were located in a valley between two tall peaks. Once he reached the foothills, he would need to find a path through. Hours passed. The forest began to thin as the ground sloped upward. Strange rock formations appeared, too regular to be natural. Remnants of the ancient civilization they had read about, perhaps. Do-hyun stopped to rest near one such formation, a pillar of black stone carved with symbols unlike any human or Taik writing. He studied the markings, taking pictures with his datapad. Though he couldn't read them, the symbols seemed to point toward the mountains. Road signs, Do-hyun murmured to himself, guiding travelers to the city. As twilight deepened into night, Do-hyun found shelter in a small cave at the base of the foothills. He was hungry, having used the last of his rations that morning. Carefully, he collected some of the small fruit-like growths he had seen So-hee eat during their journey. They tasted bitter but seemed safe enough. Alone in the darkness, Do-hyun found himself wondering about So-hee. Had she truly meant to help him? Or had he been a fool to trust her? She was Tyke, raised to see humans as enemies. Yet she had shared food and medicine with him, talked with him through the night, worked alongside him to uncover the truth. His thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound outside the cave. Do-hyun tensed, reaching for a heavy stone, his only weapon. "It is me," called So-hee's familiar voice. "I am alone." Relief flooded through Do-hyun as the tall figure of his Tyke companion entered the cave. She carried a pack over her shoulder that she had not had before. "I was beginning to think you might have changed your mind," Do-hyun admitted. "There was a moment when I considered it," So-hee said honestly, sitting down across from him. "When General Taejun himself asked me where you were." Do-hyun's eyes widened. "General Taejun? Here personally?" So-hee nodded. "The commander of the entire Take Third Fleet. He rarely leaves his command ship." She opened the pack she had brought, removing some food and a small device that emitted warmth when activated. "I told him I had tracked you to the western ridges, that you had stolen a communicator and were trying to contact Earth forces." "And he believed you?" "For now," so he said. But he was not pleased. He said time was running short, that they needed to secure the keystone before. She stopped abruptly. "Before what?" Do-hyun pressed. So he looked troubled. He did not finish the sentence, but I saw something in his eyes I have never seen before. Fear. They shared the food So-hee had brought. Proper Tyke military rations, designed to be safe for both species. As they ate, So-hee explained what else she had learned. The Tyke ships came directly from high command, not through normal military channels. Whatever is happening here, only the highest levels of leadership know about it. "Did you learn anything more about the keystone?" Do-hyun asked. "Only that they believe it is real, not just a legend or scientific theory, and that they are bringing heavy excavation equipment. They mean to dig it out, not just study it." They spent the night in the cave, taking turns keeping watch. Neither fully slept, too aware of the growing danger around them. At first light, they continued toward the mountains. The terrain grew steeper, the air thinner. Do-hyun struggled to breathe in the high altitude, while So-hee's dual respiratory system adapted more easily. By midday, they reached a high ridge overlooking a hidden valley. Below them stretched the ruins of a vast city, buildings of black stone, now mostly crumbled, laid out in circular patterns around a central structure that remained largely intact. "The temple," So-hee said, pointing to the central building. "That is where the joint expedition believed the keystone would be found." They made their way down carefully, alert for any sign of Tyke forces. The valley seemed deserted, but both felt a strange sensation as they moved among the ancient ruins, a vibration in the air, almost like a low hum just beyond hearing. The temple was larger than it had appeared from the ridge. Its entrance was a tall archway carved with the same symbols they had seen on the stone pillars. Inside, light filtered through cracks in the ceiling, illuminating a vast chamber. "Look at this," Do-hyun said, his voice hushed with awe. The walls of the chamber were covered with images, not carved but seemingly grown into the stone itself. They showed tall, graceful beings unlike either humans or Tyke. The beings were working with what appeared to be microscopic life forms, magnified in the images to show their complex structures. They were scientists, Do-hyun realized, studying the same microbial life we came here to research. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform with a cylindrical object about 1 meter tall. It pulsed with a faint blue light, the source of the humming they had felt. "The keystone," So-hee whispered. As they approached it carefully, the light grew stronger, responding to their presence. Symbols appeared on its surface, scrolling too fast to read. "It is scanning us," So-hee said, "learning our biology." Do-hyun studied the device with a scientist's careful eye. "I think it is some kind of control system for Iridia's ecosystem. These beings, whoever they were, they engineered the microbial life here, created it for some purpose." Before they could examine it further, the sound of engines echoed through the valley. Through the temple entrance, they saw 3 Tyke ships landing near the ruins. "They followed us," Do-hyun said, feeling a stab of betrayal. So-Hee shook her head. Not us. They followed the energy signature. She pointed to the keystone, now glowing brighter. It activated when we entered. They must have detected it. Tyke soldiers began pouring from the ships. At their head walked a tall figure in ornate armor, General Taejun himself, his face severe and determined. We need to hide, Do-hyun urged, pulling So-Hee toward a side passage. No, So-Hee said firmly. I must speak with him. Make him understand what we have learned. He will kill you for helping me, Do-hyun argued. Perhaps, So-Hee acknowledged. But I am still Tyke. He will listen to me, at least for a moment. And that may be all we need. Before Do-hyun could stop her, So-Hee walked toward the temple entrance. Her back straight, her bearing that of a commander rather than a fugitive. Do-hyun watched from the shadows as she met General Taejun at the entrance. Though he could not hear their words, he saw the general's expression change from surprise to anger. Soldiers moved to surround So-Hee. Then Taejun strode past her into the temple, his eyes fixed on the glowing keystone. At last, he said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. The power to end this war once and for all. Do-hyun remained hidden, watching as the Tyke general approached the ancient device. Behind him, So-Hee was being held by two soldiers, her face calm despite her situation. Their eyes met across the chamber. In that moment, Do-hyun knew he could not abandon his ally, even if it meant his own capture or death. He stepped out from the shadows. General Taejun, Do-hyun called, his voice steady despite his fear. I believe we need to talk about the true purpose of the keystone and the real origin of the plague that is killing both our peoples. General Taejun turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as he saw Do-hyun. The Tyke soldiers immediately raised their weapons, but Taejun held up a hand to stop them. The human scientist, Taejun said, his voice deep and cold. How convenient that you have delivered yourself to us. I came for the truth, Do-hyun replied, stepping further into the chamber. He kept his hands visible to show he was unarmed. The same truth you've been hiding from your own people, from your own soldiers. Taejun's face hardened. You know nothing. Human. I know that the plague affecting both our species originated here on Iridia, Do-hyun said, walking slowly toward the keystone. I know that it appeared immediately after the joint research expedition discovered this place 15 years ago. Some of the Tyke soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. This was clearly news to them. I also know, Do-hyun continued, that instead of working together to find a cure, certain leaders on both sides used the plague as an excuse to start a war that has benefited no one except those in power. Silence him, Taejun ordered, but the command lacked conviction. So he spoke up, still held by the two guards. The human speaks the truth, General. I have seen the evidence myself. The records in the old research outpost confirm it. The plague is not a weapon. It is something that was released accidentally when the first expedition came here. Taejun whirled on her. Commander So-Hee, you have betrayed your oath to the Tyke military. Your words mean nothing. Then listen to the evidence, Do-hyun urged. Look at the images on these walls. The beings who built this place were studying the same microbial life that causes the plague. They created it, controlled it using the keystone. Taejun turned back to the glowing device. Yes, they controlled it, and now we will control it too. The keystone is not just a scientific curiosity, human. It is a weapon more powerful than any fleet. Whoever possesses it can direct the plague, target specific worlds, specific species. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. Even Taejun's loyal soldiers seemed disturbed by this revelation. That is why you came personally, So-Hee said, understanding dawning on her face. Not to eliminate a human witness, but to secure a biological weapon. For the glory and protection of the Tyke Empire, Taejun declared. There will be no empire left if you use it that way, Do-hyun warned. The plague is already mutating, becoming more deadly to both our species. The keystone was not designed as a weapon. It was designed to maintain balance in the ecosystem. Do-hyun pointed to a series of images on the far wall, showing the tall, ancient beings as they suffered from a disease similar to the current plague. Other images showed them using the keystone to cure themselves. They created this technology to save themselves, not to destroy others, Do-Yun explained. If we use it properly, it could end the plague everywhere, save both our worlds. Taejun laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the temple. Always so noble, you humans, always believing in peace and cooperation. He gestured to his soldiers. Secure the keystone for transport. Kill the human and the traitor. The soldiers hesitated, looking at each other uncertainly. The revelations had clearly shaken their faith in their commander. You would doom your own people? So he asked, her voice rising in anger. Millions of Taik are dying from the plague. This device could save them all. Acceptable losses in war, Taejun said dismissively. Using the soldiers' momentary distraction, So-hee broke free from her guards. She rushed to Do-hyun's side, both of them now standing between Taejun and the keystone. We will not let you take it, So-hee declared. Taejun drew his sidearm, pointing it directly at them. Then you will die here. The keystone began to pulse more rapidly, its blue light growing brighter. The humming sound intensified, becoming almost painful to hear. Symbols flashed across its surface at increasing speed. It's responding to the conflict, Do-hyun realized. It can sense our intentions. He turned to look at the device more closely. The symbols seemed familiar now, similar to some of the mathematical equations he had studied in his research on Iridia's microbial life. I think I understand, Do-hyun said quietly to So-hee. The keystone needs to be programmed with the correct genetic sequence to target the plague. If it's programmed incorrectly, it could make everything worse. Can you program it? So-hee asked urgently. Maybe. I've studied the plague extensively. But I would need time, and… Do-hyun looked at Taejun, who was now ordering his reluctant soldiers forward. We don't have time. The chamber shook suddenly, dust falling from the ancient ceiling. The keystone's energy was affecting the stability of the temple itself. Stop this madness, Taejun, called one of the older Taik soldiers. We should listen to what they are saying. Traitors, all of you, Taejun snarled. He fired his weapon at the soldier who had spoken, the energy blast striking him in the chest. The soldier fell and chaos erupted. Some soldiers fled the unstable building. Others turned their weapons on each other, unsure who to trust. Taejun used the confusion to rush toward the keystone. We have to stop him. So-hee shouted over the growing noise. Do-hyun had already reached the ancient device. His scientist's mind raced, studying the patterns of symbols, trying to understand the alien technology. There appeared to be a control panel near the base responding to touch. I need to input the correct genetic sequence, Do-hyun called to So-hee. Keep him away from me. So-hee intercepted Taejun, tackling her former commander to the ground. They struggled fiercely, Taejun's greater strength matched by So-hee's speed and determination. Do-hyun worked frantically at the control panel, drawing on everything he knew about the plague and Iridia's unique microbial life. The symbols began to change under his touch, the blue light shifting to a softer green. Whatever you're doing, human, you will fail, Taejun shouted, throwing So-hee off. He fired his weapon at Do-hyun, but the shot went wide as So-hee grabbed his arm. The temple shook more violently. Large pieces of the ceiling began to fall. Most of the remaining soldiers had fled, leaving only Do-hyun, So-hee, and Taejun in the central chamber. It needs a complete human DNA pattern to stabilize, Do-hyun realized, speaking half to himself. A template to recognize the plague and neutralize it. He looked at his hands on the control panel. A small chamber had opened in the keystone's center, glowing with intense light. In that moment, Do-hyun understood what he had to do. So-hee, he called. Get out of here. The temple is collapsing. Not without you, she replied, still struggling with Taejun. I have to stay, Do-hyun said. The keystone needs a complete human genetic pattern to work properly. It needs me. So-hee looked up in horror, understanding his meaning. No, there must be another way. Taejun used her momentary distraction to break free. He rushed toward Do-hyun, weapon raised. Step away from the device, human. It's too late, Do-hyun said calmly. I've already begun the process. The green light from the keystone had begun to envelop Do-hyun, scanning his body cell by cell. He could feel it inside him, reading his genetic code, using it to create the cure. Taejun fired at the keystone itself, but the energy blast was absorbed into the light with no effect. What have you done? Taejun demanded. What I came here to do, Do-hyun replied. Find a cure. The light grew stronger, surrounding Do-hyun completely now. He felt no pain, only a strange sense of peace and purpose. Get out, Sohee, he urged again. Take what we've learned back to both our peoples. The truth about the war, about the plague. Make them understand. Sohee moved toward him, but the intensity of the light forced her back. Do-hyun, please. They called me a monster, Do-hyun said, his voice growing fainter as his body began to dissolve into the light. But I'm just a man who believes peace is possible. The keystone pulsed one final time, sending a massive wave of energy outward. The wave passed harmlessly through Sohee but struck Taejun full force. The Taik general screamed as the microbial plague within his own body, which he had been secretly carrying, was neutralized instantly. The energy continued outward, passing through the temple walls, spreading across Iridia and beyond. Wherever it encountered the plague, it would neutralize it, using Do-hyun's DNA as a template to restore balance to the infected cells. As the light faded, Do-hyun was gone. Only the keystone remained, now dormant, its purpose fulfilled. The temple gave a final shudder and began to collapse in earnest. So he grabbed the unconscious form of Taejun and dragged him outside, just as the ancient structure fell in on itself, burying the keystone and any evidence of Do-hyun's sacrifice. 6 months later, Sohee stood at a simple memorial on Iridia. The planet had been declared a neutral zone, a place where Taik and humans could meet in peace. The plague had vanished throughout the galaxy, saving millions of lives on both sides. The memorial bore words in both Taik and human languages. Here fell not a monster, but a bridge between worlds. Sohee placed her hand on the smooth stone. Behind her, delegations from Earth and the Taik homeworld were arriving for the first official peace talks. The war had ended when the truth about its origins was revealed. Taejun and his conspirators had been removed from power, and a new era of cooperation had begun. Do-hyun's research notes, which Sohee had preserved, had provided both species with valuable insights into not just the plague but many other diseases. His final sacrifice had become a symbol of what was possible when ancient Ine,